I do want to let you know that this evening's program will be recorded and it will be available to watch on LitNet's YouTube channel. That said, we will have a question and answer period that will not be recorded, so you could feel free to ask questions that you don't necessarily want made public after the talk. So I would like to introduce Lee Doherty, who's the Executive Director of LitNet and a really, truly amazing person making a huge impact on our community. Lee, thank you for being here. Thank you. What I love about tonight is I see a lot of LitNet tutors and I see Stockbridge community members or people that are not LitNet tutors. Call me. If you want to be a tutor. But this is really wonderful. Wendy and I and Miguel met months ago to envision how can we partner. And this is exactly what we had hoped, and as COVID fades away, slowly, but it's there. This is the biggest group we've had, which is wonderful because it's an important conversation. We've had a couple book groups. We have one coming up, which I'll tell you about at the end. But this is just lovely that you're all here. This was specifically created because tutors, people who tutor with LitNet, asked. They wanted to know more about what it was like for their learners. But it's wonderful that other people in the community are also interested to hear about this. So we are so lucky to have Lorena Deuce. Lorena is the Director of Client and Community Services at the Immigrant Center, the Berkshire Immigrant Center. She is also the Interim Director, so she's a busy woman. We are very lucky to have Lorena on our board, to the LitNet board, so who better than to tell us the ABCs of immigration tonight, Lorena Deuce.
And you can all hear me okay? Yes. Good. Welcome everybody, and thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Lorena Deuce, and I've been at the Immigrant Center for almost 7 years now. And I'm from Venezuela and came here almost 7 years ago as well. As an immigrant and trying to navigate the entire process to be able to feel safe in the United States, and I can actually say that I'm there now, but that has been a long road for me too. So the intention for tonight is to just do a quick overview of immigration statuses, just so people can understand where or in what stages your learners are, or where they could possibly be, but also to understand how do you get to that part that is so important, that is citizenship. And maybe some people that are not able to do that, how can they feel safe in the United States? So I will just do a quick overview. I do want to say that each case is very specific, and most of the time we ask that the person or the student or the person that you know makes an appointment with us. And the reason is because we want to have a safe space to have a very in-depth conversation, but also that is confidential so people can share their information feeling safe. And also because it is very different. So someone who maybe entered in 2001 and different person entered the same way in 2002, that is already different. So their situation is not the same, and we don't want people thinking that, oh, because this happened to this person, it's the same case for me. And then I also wanted to say that at the end, we're going to have time for questions and answers, and feel free to ask whatever you're thinking about. Please, if you could, do not share names of your learners, to keep the confidentiality. Also, feel free to come at the end and talk to me directly, but also knowing that maybe the answer is please make an appointment, schedule something with us so we can talk a little bit more. So I just wanted to give you a quick overview of where our clients come from. Our fiscal year goes through from July through June. So this fiscal year 2022 ended in June of 2022. We saw a total of 894 clients, and they came from 74 different countries. Last year, the most were coming from Colombia. So you can see that we mostly serve people from South and Central America and some people from Africa. We do speak Spanish all the time in the office. We have a Portuguese speaker too. We have a French speaker. We have a Russian speaker. And then in the other languages, we do have to find interpretation, but that's not too difficult. So how do people come here? There are three main ways for people to come here, and one of the most common ones is with non-immigrant visas. And what does this mean? It means that the person is coming for a specific purpose and then they're leaving. It can be a tourist visa, so you're coming to visit for a few months. It can be a work visa, so you're only working for an amount of time and then leaving. It can be a student visa, so you're completing your program and then you're leaving. For people that may not know, a visa is what allows you to enter a country when you don't have a specific passport that allows you to do that. So I can say that for United States citizens, people do not usually have to apply for visas to go anywhere. But guess where you have to apply for a visa if you want to go to? To Venezuela. So that's why my husband has never been there. Because he would need to go to Mexico to apply for a visa to try to enter Venezuela. And what does that allow you to do? It allows you to enter for an amount of time, usually 90 days. You cannot work, you're only visiting, and then you're going back to your country. And applying for that visa also means that you have to prove that you have sufficient means to come to the United States, to provide for yourself, to pay for your tickets, and to make sure that you're not going to work. So not everybody gets them. For the rest of the non-immigrant visas, then they have a specific amount of time that people can be here for, and then they have to leave the United States. The second way is immigrant visas. So what does that mean? The person is already prepared to immigrate to the United States legally through a petition, and I'm going to show you what those petitions are in a minute. So what that means is that they usually get interviewed at an embassy or consulate in their country. They are vetted, they're fingerprinted, they have to get medical exams and make sure that they don't have a disease that they're going to bring to the United States and kill everybody. And then after that, they're allowed to come in and they become permanent residents, which means that they have a green card and that they can live here legally as long as they comply with terms, they don't do anything illegal, they don't get arrested, etc. And then we have the term IWI, which is people that enter without inspection, or undocumented people. Who are the people that enter without inspection? People that cross the border illegally, people that maybe were in a car and no immigration officer saw them and said, yes, you can come in. So anybody who enters with no visa or walks through the border, sometimes in the past the Canadian border, and they were not authorized to enter, meaning that they didn't have an interview with an immigration officer, they didn't put a stamp on their passport, then all those people are undocumented and they're illegal. They enter without inspection. So I was talking about coming with an immigrant visa, coming with a green card. And there are different ways that you can do that, and there are also different ways that you can apply for it here in the United States. So the first thing that I want to talk about quickly is this visa bulletin. So what happens is that if you're a United States citizen, or you are a permanent resident, meaning that you already have a green card somehow, then you're able to petition for some of your family members. You're able to send a form to the U.S. Immigration Services. You have to wait a bunch of months, depending on the process that you're doing. You have to pay a lot of money, but then eventually your family member can come in. So United States citizens, they can petition for their spouses, they can petition for their kids, they can petition for their parents, and they can petition for their siblings. The difference is the amount of time that that's going to get. So I put here immediate relatives, because if you're the spouse of a United States citizen, then it usually takes about a year for you to come into the United States. If you are the parent of a United States citizen, kind of the same amount, and same if you are a child under the age of 21. If you're over the age of 21, or if you're a sibling of a United States citizen, or you are the spouse of a permanent resident, or you're married, then that changes. And one of the examples that I can give you, and this you can find on the Department of State website, and changes every month. It usually goes backwards. It's not very promising. But what this means is, this is the amount of time that people from certain countries have to wait before there's a visa available for them to come into the United States as permanent resident. And the best example I can give you is, for example, in 2020, when I became a United States citizen, one of the things that I decided to do, and the only thing that I've done actually, is petition for my sister. And not because my sister wants to come to the United States. She's fine, she lives in Colombia now, and she's fine there with her husband. But they have a kid, they have a daughter. And she's only 5 now, at that point she was 3. So what I was thinking is, I want to make sure that once a visa becomes available, if they don't want to come, they don't have to. But if my niece is still under the age of 21, she could come to the United States. And I would want to give her that opportunity. That she can come, she can live here, she can feel safe, and she can do whatever she wants. So what happens with that? A petition for a sibling is this category right here, F4. And what this means is that they're working right now on petitions received on December 15 of 2007. So there is a 15-year wait before there's a visa available. So that's why I rushed and I said, I need to petition for my sister because if my niece is 3 and she has to wait 15 years, at least she's gonna be what? 18, and she can still come. If I had waited and at the point where that visa is available, she's 21, she cannot come anymore. She's an adult, she doesn't need her parents, so she cannot come. So what it means is that my application I submitted at some point in 2020, I can't remember what was the date, but once that date that I submitted my application is the same as this one, they're going to get the good news and they're going to know, okay, now we can start the processing to come into the United States legally. And that can take another 2 years maybe, depending on, because there's a lot of people sending petitions. And then if you're from China, India, Mexico, or the Philippines, you may have to wait longer. And the reason is because there's a lot more immigration from those countries. So the amount of visas that they allow every year are less. Next slide, please. So, if you're not in one of those categories that are for family petitions, which not everybody is, right? Not everybody has a U.S. citizen sibling or parent or spouse, then a lot of people try to apply for humanitarian relief. Some of these ones are ways that someone can get a green card. Some of other ones, and I'm going to explain them, would allow them to be here for a little bit, but that's it. It doesn't actually give them a path to a green card. So for this humanitarian relief, people could be in the United States. So a lot of people that cross the border try to apply for one of these if they're eligible. So one of the most common ones is asylum that you probably have heard of. And asylum is a protection that the government of the United States gives you if you can prove that you have suffered persecution in your country. It is a lot more complicated than that. There's a lot that you have to prove. You have to go to an interview that is really difficult. The immigration services really do not care if some of that is triggering. They want to hear the entire story before they say, yes, you can stay or not. But if you apply for asylum, you need to be in the United States. You have to apply within the first year that you entered. It doesn't matter if you entered through the border. You have 1 year only to apply, otherwise you don't have the opportunity anymore. You have to send an application to the immigration services. You have to wait 150 days to apply for work authorization. And then you have to wait a year and a half before you see an immigration judge or more. If the immigration judge sees your case and decides that, yes, you do have a fear of persecution or you have suffered persecution and you have proven it, then the person is approved. And then later on, they can apply for a green card. It's a year after the judge says, yes, you have an asylum case. They can apply for a green card. That usually takes about 2 years to be approved, but then they have the green card and they can feel safer. One of the things about asylum is that the person that receives this cannot come back to their country. Because if you're saying that you fear persecution in your country, why would you go back there? And you can try to petition for some of your family members. Then we have refugees, who are similar to asylum, but the only difference is that they are processed outside the United States. So they go to a bordering country, they go to a refugee camp, they say they have fear of persecution or that they are suffering persecution in their country, and once they are processed outside, then they may be sent here. Really, the amount of people that are sent here is what the United States say that they're going to receive that year, but they can go to any other country that are receiving refugees. Once they enter as refugees, then they can apply for benefits and they will eventually get their green card too. Then we have temporary protected status, which is really limited, but this is for people that have been here at a specific time, depending on the country, and it is designated by the government for countries that maybe are suffering some sort of war or are suffering some sort of disaster. One of the most common ones has been El Salvador for over 20 years, right after the earthquake. people have been protected like that. Under President Trump, he was trying to eliminate some of those. Some of those were ended. We still have a few, including Venezuela, that was included there a couple of years ago. With temporary protected status, the only thing that you can do is work legally. You get a work authorization and you renew it every 2 years, and that's it. That doesn't give you a path to obtaining a green card or becoming a citizen. We don't know if that's going to change in the future, but so far the only thing that you can do is work and pay the government every 2 years to renew your work authorization card. Then we have some other humanitarian visas that are very specific. We have VAWA, which is Violence Against Women Act, and this was meant for spouses or kids or parents of United States citizens or permanent residents. And this is because they realized that a lot of spouses were taking on saying, if you don't do what I'm saying you have to do, I'm going to have you deported. So that is abusive, and they said if the spouse or the parent or the kid of a United States citizen or permanent resident can prove that, then they should feel safe of leaving that abusive situation they live in, and they can apply for a green card. That also takes several years because everything is backed up. The immigration services are, they don't have enough staff either, but that would allow the person to be able to feel safer and to leave that abusive relationship. And that is for men and women. It doesn't matter that it just says Women Act. Then we have T visas, which is for people that have that are victim of trafficking. We don't see them that often in the area, but they're there. Usually labor trafficking or sexual trafficking. Then if the person is able to prove that, then they're able to eventually, in many years later, apply for a green card. And then we have U visas, which is for victims of crime. The crimes are very extensive, so blackmail or robbery or kidnapping, there's many of them. But if the person is able to collaborate with the police, go give their statement, make sure that they're following the rules, etc., then eventually a judge could give them the yes and say, yes, you are approved for your U visa. For U visas specifically, you do have to wait 3 years after you get approved to apply for your green card. And then to get approval, it takes another 2 or 3 years. During that time, you can only be here in the United States. You can work legally, but it does take a very long time. We also have SIJs, Special Immigrant Juvenile, which is for kids that are in the United States that are under the age of 21 and that have been neglected or abused by one or both parents. What happens with this is that the kid first has to report, and the judge has to take custody of this kid in family court. And the kid has to be placed with a family or a member of their family that is not one of their parents. If that is proven that the kid has been neglected or abused, then they are able to apply for a green card and live here legally and eventually apply for citizenship. They cannot petition for any of their parents. Even if only one parent was abusive, then they say, no, you cannot try to bring in your mom, even if your dad was abusive. They just say, absolutely not. But it gives them the opportunity to stay in the United States, and a lot of parents do prefer that. We have a lot of people that send their kids through the border and stay in the other countries because their kids would be safer here even by themselves, so that is an option for them. And then we have DACA, which is this Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And this program was created under the Obama administration. His intention was to give some sort of status to kids that entered before they were the age of 16 and that didn't know that they were coming into the United States because their parents were bringing them. So for DACA, you do have to prove, or did have to prove, that you were here in the United States a certain amount of time, usually before 2007, you needed to be present physically. In 2012, there's like a bunch of dates that you have to meet, and you have to prove show a lot of documents to prove that. But if you were eligible, then what they would allow you to do is apply for work authorization and renew it every 2 years. President Trump decided to end DACA, and for a small period of time before he left, there was a time where you could actually send new applications, but that was stopped and is still stopped. So what happened was that We have a bunch of clients that were eligible and that we send their applications, and their applications are there. They did take the money, and they said, we're not gonna look at these applications until the judge decides something. For now, people can only renew it. We really don't know what's gonna happen with the program and what's gonna happen with over 600,000 kids that have DACA, that are adults now, that have never been to their, or don't remember the countries, that have been doing their careers here, working in hospitality and have amazing lives, and they don't know if they will have to go back to their country or not. So one thing that I want to mention about this, before I move on, is that at the center, we hold an accreditation by the Department of Justice that allows us to represent clients for immigration purposes only. So I cannot give you advice on divorce or child support and stuff like that. I will refer you to someone. The accreditation that we have is a partial accreditation. And what that means is that we can represent clients in front of immigration services, the USCIS, and we can also represent clients for embassies and all the work that is done before they come in. What we cannot do with this partial accreditation is serve clients that have to go to court. It's because we need a full accreditation, and that takes a very, very long time, and we are at capacity and we haven't been able to even start. But this full accreditation, what requires is that you have to have over 500 hours of court observation, legal writing, shadowing, etc. Then you have to apply, then you have to go to an interview, then you get fingerprinted, and if you get approved, then you can represent clients in front of court. And the people that have entered through the border, IWI people, they will need to go to court, no matter what, because they did not enter legally. So unfortunately, we are not able to represent those clients. And we are seeing more and more people coming in that way. So what we do is that we can have an initial consultation with that person, and we can have an honest conversation. There's a few immigration attorneys in the area, and they charge a lot of money, and they are very busy too. So what we prefer and what we always say is, come to our office, let's have a conversation. We charge $40 an hour, $40 for the appointment actually, and sometimes it's a little bit more than an hour. We do not deny the service, so if the person cannot pay, they don't have to pay, we will still see them. But at least I can say, after I ask a bunch of questions, I can say, you do have a case, you should meet an immigration attorney. Or, really, you don't have it. This is why. Let me be honest with you, and this is how you can be safe in the United States. And then, if you want to have a second opinion and you want to meet with an immigration attorney, here is the list of people that you could see that we trust and that you could go to and have that conversation, or maybe say, I'm going to try to pay and see if I have a case. But at least we avoid that you have to pay $200 for that initial consultation for an attorney to tell you, no, you don't have a case. Or if you do have it, then you decide, it can be $5,000, it can be $10,000. I don't know how much attorneys cost, but they are really expensive. So that's why we try to have those initial consultations and honest conversations, but unfortunately we cannot take all cases. So now, let's say that you finally successfully applied for one of those processes and you have a permanent resident card or a green card. You could possibly become a citizen. And what do you need for that? Depending on how you came here, you could apply for your citizenship after you've had your green card for 3 years or for 5 years. 3 years is for spouses of United States citizens only. The rest of the people that were petitioned for another family member, or got a humanitarian green card, then they have to wait 5 years. You need to be at least 18. You need to meet continuous and physical residence requirements, which means that if you're applying for Massachusetts, you need to prove that you have been living here for at least 3 months. And if you're applying based on 5 years, they do ask that you list all the times that you have left the United States and how many days you have spent outside the country. And why is that? They don't allow you that as a permanent resident, you shouldn't spend more than 6 months out of the country at a time. So out of those 5 years, half of it you should have spent it in here physically, and out of the other half, you shouldn't have spent more than 6 months out. And that is not the case for many people, because people are usually here and working. But then we have some people that are a little bit older and that decide to go back to their countries when it gets really cold in here. So that's when we have some issues that we're like, no, just don't be that close. Wait a little bit more in the winter when it's not that cold. The person must be a person of good moral character. I'm sorry, it says God, but it's good. Almost like God, right? Because they want this person to be perfect. The person shouldn't have committed any crimes. The person shouldn't owe any taxes. They should have filed their taxes every year. Some crimes, I have to say, we do have to check that. Maybe if you committed a little crime, it depends on what happened and when you have to go to court, etc. But in general, crimes are no good. And there is this bunch of questions that they ask about if you are a terrorist, if you've ever, and some of you may know if you're tutoring a citizenship applicant. So you have to be perfect, basically. You have to make sure that you haven't done anything wrong and that you have paid everything you need to pay. And very important, you have to speak, write, and read in English. You have to prove that you can communicate, that you can write, that you can read, and also you have to learn 100 questions of the history of the United States. Out of those 100, you have to you're asked 10 of them, and you have to answer 6 of them correctly. So for some people that could be easy. For some other people they need a little bit more work, and thank you LitNet for providing that assistance to be able to prepare for that. Because it is a nerve-wracking situation. And I consider myself very fluent in English, but when I went to my interview, I said, I think I'm going to forget how to speak. I was shaking so much. And it is so important. It is also almost $800 that you have to pay to the immigration services. You have to travel 2.5 hours to Lawrence to do that. So it is a very important thing, and it is very nerve-wracking. So thank you also, tutors, for the support that you give to the students. Because one of the things that I really like about LitNet and about getting to know better the organization is that relationship that tutors create with the students. And that is very important because sometimes that's the only support that there is. And I always say that I wish I had that when I moved out of Venezuela and I was learning English. That was not something that was available for me, and it's very important. So if you meet all these requirements, then you could technically apply for citizenship. It usually takes about 6 months. For some people, it's 8 months. For some people, it's a year. It is very random. But technically, once you have passed your test, then you are sworn in as a citizen. And what that means is that you can apply for your U.S. passport. You can move to a different country if you want to and come back whenever you want. You can spend more than 6 months out of the country. You can also apply for some jobs that the requirement is only to be a U.S. citizen. And then you can petition for some other family members. So to recap, and then just talk a little bit about the things, the questions that have come up in the past, and to give you the opportunity also to ask more. So an undocumented person would be any person who entered the country illegally, or any person who entered with a visa and stayed more than the amount of time that they were given. So if you enter with a tourist visa and you were given 6 months to be here only, and you stay 7 months, after 6 months and 1 day, you are undocumented because you're not authorized to be here anymore. If you came in with a work visa and you were supposed to be here for 2 years working for this person, but the second day you didn't like the job and you went to work for someone else, you are undocumented because your visa was to work for this person only. And when you decided to go someplace else, that visa got canceled. So if you overstay your student visa, after the 2 years you graduated and you didn't want to go back to your country and you decided to stay, you are undocumented. So what things to keep in mind about undocumented people? The first thing is that, and this is a question that comes up a lot, can my learner or my friend file taxes, and is that safe for them, and what is an IT? So an IT number is a tax identification number that was created by the government because they know that there are undocumented people here working. So basically they said, we're not going to allow you to work legally, but since you're working, you're going to pay me taxes. So, in fact, it was 2020 that I was attending a webinar on, the IRS, and they were talking about how they had a surplus of $20 billion because that was undocumented people paying taxes. They don't get returned. They don't pay into Social Security or into none of that. They pay their money and that's it. They never see it again. But what happens with this I-10 is that because you're filing tax, it allows you to file taxes. And because you're filing taxes, then there's a lot of other opportunities for you. There's a lot of banks in the area that allow you to apply for a mortgage or to apply for a loan if you're able to prove that you have done your taxes, because they want to see that you do have an income and that you're going to pay your loan, right? So we always advise to do it. The IRS and the Immigration Services, or ICE, they don't have any contact unless they're actually searching for something specifically. So it's not like the IRS is going to say, oh, this person filed with an I-10, it's undocumented, let me call my friend at ICE and tell them that they have to go deport this person. That doesn't happen. They don't even have the capacity, and they actually want the money. They want the money to keep coming. So it is very safe. But what does this mean? Yes, you can file taxes. Yes, you are working without authorization. An I-10 is not legal authorization to work, and that is the big difference. It is more positive to have it because it allows for you to have, other jobs that maybe some employers are a little bit hesitant, but if they know that you're paying your taxes, then they might give it to you. But it is not work authorization, and that is very important for people to know. So another thing to keep in mind is driving without a license. We live in a county that is very isolated. I live in West Stockbridge, and before I was able to get my driver's license, I was just stuck there for several months, and it was terrible. There's no buses to go there or to get out of there. There's no taxis. It's a beautiful town, but it's like, I need to do things. So, driving without a license can be a risk. The RMV does allow for people to, because technically when you're coming in with a tourist visa, you should be able to use your driver's license from your country to drive while you're visiting. So in Massachusetts, the RMV does have a form that they ask you that if you have your driver's license in a different language, you should get it translated. And you put it in that piece of paper. It needs to be signed by a notary public or licensed translator or someone from a college. But you drive with that, and at least if you get pulled over and you've been here only for a month, then the police officer can see that you do have a valid driver's license. So we also always recommend, if you're driving with a driver's license that is not from any part in the United States, please get your driver's license translated. That doesn't mean that they're not going to arrest you. It doesn't mean that they're not going to give you a ticket, but they can be easier on you, and sometimes they are. The good news is that in July, finally, Massachusetts will allow undocumented people to obtain driver's licenses. So in July, people will have to start applying. They still have to be registered and insured. They still have to take their test. Everything as any other person, but at least they will be able to have that, which will also be at least a proof of identification for some purposes. The only problem with the driver's licenses right now is that one of the things that they will ask for is for the person to have a valid passport from their country. And that's not very easy for everybody. When you enter through the border, your passport is actually taken, so you need to apply for a new one. Some embassies are really far away, and if you're from Venezuela, you have to go to Canada or Mexico to be able to get one, and it takes over a year. So it is really difficult, but that was one of the requirements that they wouldn't change. So that's the only, right now we're working on trying to figure out how we can get other embassies to come to the area and assist their citizens. In terms of ICE enforcement, I was complaining about how isolated we were, but that's actually a good thing now that we're that isolated, because we really don't have ICE presence in the area that much. We've had some specific incidents, and I do have to say that those incidents were related to a crime specifically, and I haven't heard of one in many years. President Biden sent a memo, and basically what he said was, he set up who was a priority for deportation. So if you commit a crime that gets you arrested and you have to be prosecuted, then it is likely that the police is going to communicate with the Immigration Services. If you get pulled over and you have to go to court because you were driving without a license or a light was off or something like that, that's not going to get you in trouble. But if you murder someone, then that will get you in trouble. So they said this is the first priority. We'll go and find that person and we'll arrest them. If they think that you are going to commit some sort of terrorism, then you are a priority too. Otherwise, if you are behaving and you are under the radar and you are just living your life, then there shouldn't be a reason why ICE comes to get you and arrest you and put you in deportation proceedings. There's an exception for people that have entered through the border and already have to go see a judge and have a date if they don't show up to that court date. That's a different conversation. We always advise people to go to court. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about before I open it to questions is confidentiality and asking about status. And if you want to, you can go to the next slide. Oh, okay, you can go back. I don't know why it's not there. So when do you ask about status? And that's a very important question because I know we want to help people, but there needs to be the right setting, right? And if you have a learner or someone that wants to come to you and talk about their status, that's completely fine. Like, you listen and hopefully they are in a safe space. But people shouldn't be asking anybody's statuses unless you are in front of an immigration judge. Then the judge will know and will have to ask if you have a status in the United States. Or if you are in my office or the office of an immigration attorney, that's a conversation that you're going to have. And some agencies will ask you for proof of status. They won't ask you directly if you're legally here or not. They will ask you for proof of status to be able to apply for a benefit. Most public benefits, you do have to show that you're a United States citizen. For a driver's license right now, you have to show that you do have a status for at least a year and that you have a social security card. So they won't ask you directly, but they will ask you to show something. And at that point you can say, I don't have that document available, and what they will say is, okay, you are not approved at this time. When does it not come up? It doesn't come up in school. In fact, all kids need to be served up through 12, no matter what their immigration status is. It cannot come up when a police officer pulls you over. It's not possible. They will ask you to show valid driver's license. If you show that you have a driver's license from a different country, they could ask you if you have your passport with you. And the reason why they ask that is because they want to check if you have a visa, and if you just enter, then you're probably just visiting and that's it, and they let you go. We ask people that they don't carry around their passports. It's a very important document that cannot get lost or robbed, and we know that it can take many years to get a new one, so we ask that people don't do that. But the police officer could say, okay, you don't have a valid driver's license, then here's your citation, or let's call someone that can come get the car. But the police officer cannot ask you if you have an immigration status. And if they do, you need to bring that up to us, complain, because that is not legal. So, because it does not come, and it's that it doesn't come up in everywhere, then you do need to be very careful about where you're asking it or what you're asking. I think it is very important that a learner or a student can trust you. But it's also, one of the things that we see with most of our clients is that confidentiality part that we have to repeat so much. And we're happy to do it, but even when they read it on our website, when they already have a friend that has been served by us, they sometimes don't want to share that information. And it is understandable. Some people have gone through so much trauma and, or they're scared, they don't know if we're the government and stuff like that. So it is very important, and that's why in the question and answers we don't want to record it, but we also don't want to share names, because that is very important. It is very important that people know that their information is going to stay with you and that they are in a safe space to do so. Okay, next slide. Okay, and I'm just going to open it for questions. I just wanted to leave our contact information there. We are located in Pittsfield, and thanks to coronavirus, what we started doing was offering virtual consultations, and we decided to keep those because we're being able to serve more people. In fact, people from Great Barrington that were not able to come to our office because they didn't have transportation, that's not a problem anymore. But one of the things that has happened is that now we're serving many other states because of the Zoom part, but it has been very positive. So you can call our office. We have our website there, and you can also request an appointment there. So maybe if you're with your learner, you go to our website and you click on appointment, you're able to help your learner fill it out. It just asks basic information, contact information. How do you want to get how should we reach out to you? You can also email our info email, and our intake coordinator will respond to you. We'll try to call you. We'll send you emails, and you can also visit us. We're there Monday through Thursday from 9 to 3 at 67 East Street. We're on the second floor of St. Stephen's Church. We are on a hybrid model, so our intake coordinator is there every day, but some of us are not. We have some days. So one day you may get me there, or some others not. So you're welcome to visit us, and also email us if you have any questions. Thank you.